This episode discusses sensitive topics related to child safety, mental health, sexual exploitation, and harm involving minors. Please listen with care.
Hey, Mark Zuckerberg, declare moral bankruptcy and start over. Why fight against basic safety standards instead of leading the way in protecting children?
Do you want your small children, Max, August, and Aurelia, to scroll Instagram? At what age? Ever?
So why did my teenage daughter receive a dick pic from a stranger on Instagram?
So when will the lives of children outweigh your company's engagement metrics?
Why are you hiding the harms from us?
How many dead children is acceptable to you?
Why don't you care about kids like me?
Welcome to The Heat Is On, an investigative miniseries by Scrolling to Death in partnership with Heat Initiative. I'm Nicki Petrosi, host of Scrolling to Death.
And I'm Sarah Gardner, CEO of the Heat Initiative. And today, we're going to give you the tools, facts, and the fire to fight Meta and their abuse of kids on their platforms. So today, the heat is on Meta.
From a Harvard dorm in 2004 to 3.3 billion daily users today, Facebook's rise is a story of explosive growth, big buyouts, and big scandals. But the story starts in 2003 when Mark Zuckerberg created a website called Facemash, where Harvard students would rate each other's attractiveness on a hot or not scale. The project sparked controversy and was shut down within days. The next year, in 2004, Mark Zuckerberg launches The Facebook out of his Harvard dorm. And for those of us in college, it felt like the cool insiders club. By 2006, Facebook had 12 million users and it opened up to everyone. Then came the features that got us hooked: private messaging, the like button, infinite scroll. And in 2012, Facebook went public and bought Instagram for $1 billion. By 2014, it grabbed WhatsApp, locking in billions of users worldwide. But the cracks started showing. The 2016 election revealed how easily disinformation spread, and in 2018, the Cambridge Analytica scandal exposed massive data misuse. In 2021, whistleblower Frances Haugen revealed that Facebook knew its platforms actively harmed children. And under growing pressure, Facebook rebranded as Meta and pushed the metaverse with a VR game called Horizon Worlds. Today, Meta remains one of the most powerful and controversial companies, continuing to shape our daily lives with 3.3 billion daily active users. So when it comes to Meta, there's a lot more to the story than what we see on the surface. And there's a lot that parents deserve to know about this company, one that our kids spend a lot of time on.
So today we're going to give parents a real understanding of how kids are interacting with Meta's products and what's actually happening, and also ways to actively push back. Because Meta's tricky. I mean, a lot of parents love Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And it also seems less scary than some of the other platforms or environments that we talk about. So there is nuance here. But I think when we take a step back and look at the again, industrial scale harm that Meta has caused kids, it's time to be alarmed, and it's also time to question your assumptions about whether or not it's safe.
And maybe even question our own use. A child came up to me at one point, a middle schooler, after I gave a presentation and said, "So you're telling me that Instagram is bad, but why does my mom love it so much?" And so I think we're going to maybe get you to a point here as a parent to be like, maybe I shouldn't be supporting this platform that is actively harming children.
Yeah, I mean, even my daughter said to me yesterday, she's like, "You're on Instagram a lot." And then she said, "And you're the ones mad at it."
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth we are all having to face here, is we're all addicted to all these platforms, but particularly Meta has done a great job addicting people of all generations.
Because it is tobacco, it is smoking. And the time that I most recently deleted Instagram from my phone and then caught myself picking up my phone throughout the day to just open up the app, like catching yourself doing it, was easily like more than 25 times in a single day. Just instinctual, like picking it up and opening the app. I think Instagram is addictive. Like, I don't even think people are questioning whether or not it's addictive anymore because
Right.
it's so obvious. I think the question is like the nefarious side of that addiction, and specifically in interacting with young brains and brains that are not developed, and what that can do to a child's mind.
Yeah, and I think that Meta promised us a way to connect with the world and be creative and explore our interests, when behind the scenes they were actually providing addiction and exploitation and allowing all of these things, or enabling all of these things to happen for their profit. So I think it's our responsibility as consumers and users of this product to understand the interworkings of it and what it's doing to harm all of us, and then go forward with a decision about how we want to interact with it and if we want our children to interact with it.
Let's just also take a step back and like help familiarize the audience with just how popular Meta is and how influential it is for minors. So over 61% of US teens use Instagram, with 12% of those saying that they use it almost constantly. So
and let's pause on that. Like,
yeah.
the addictiveness of the platform, and the teens are using it probably more than adults are using these platforms. Do you think? Do you feel like you use it almost constantly? I may clarify my use as that.
Oh, absolutely. I don't use it constantly anymore, but there was a time when I absolutely did, and I can say with certainty that a bunch of my mom friends are using it constantly. Okay, so Meta recently shared that they host hundreds of millions of teens worldwide, and without age verification, there are millions of teens and preteens or even pre-preteens on Instagram and Facebook. This has come up a lot recently in like the news because of Meta announcing its PG-13 rating, which we'll also get into. But there have been a number of hearings in Congress on this topic, and you have members of Congress asking Mark Zuckerberg, well, how are you ensuring that underage users are not getting on the platform?
Right.
And there's always this like very wishy-washy answer. And we saw it again with Adam Mosseri, most recently being interviewed by a number of news outlets saying, well, do you know the age of the kids and can you keep them off of the platform? And his answer is, well, we kind of know, and we use all these signals to decide. It's like, you got to know the kid's age. Why do you even have the age rating if you aren't enforcing it? And this gets me really fired up, sorry, because I've also seen videos from researchers who looked at how much content, what was the type of content on Instagram teens, and there were so many videos of clearly 8, 9-year-olds, even 7-year-olds, repeating this popular meme where you said your age and then you said your likes. So it's like, my name is Da, and I'm 9, and I like blue, and my favorite animal's a cat. And it's them in the videos.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, oh, maybe a parent let the kid use the account to post that. But at the same time, if a kid is there saying, I'm 9, I'm 8, I'm 7, that blatantly flies in the face of Meta's age verification claims.
Right. They say they're using AI to remove kids that they can tell are under 13. But the issue is that they really want young kids on their platform. It creates lifelong users for them with that brand loyalty. They make a lot of money off of minor users. We know for sure that the top social media companies made $11 billion on minors in just 1 year, and that probably does not account for all the kids that are under 13. And so if they capture these kids young, they'll keep them for life and they'll make a ton of money off of them. Now, I want to play a quick clip here from Meta whistleblower and incredible human and mom, Kelly Stonelake, who was brave enough to speak out about her experiences working for Meta for, 15 years, 10 or 15 years. So I want to play a clip now of Kelly speaking to the underage users on Meta's platforms.
Meta knows that there are millions of kids using their products. They know that. In the case of Horizon Worlds, where I was part of the leadership team, they knew that the product was overwhelmingly majority children, young children, who sounded in many cases under the age of 13.
And what did they do with those kids that admitted they were under 13, or just through voice? You could verify that they were under 13. Did Meta remove them? Did they do anything about it?
Well, Meta removed somebody, but it wasn't the kids. It wasn't the kids they were protecting. It was the time and comfort of the leadership team that they were protecting. And in my experience, when we were running into an issue where we couldn't get Horizon employees to use the product due to both the product quality issues as well as this overwhelming presence of loud kids and bullying and harassment within the product, we were trying to lead by example and organize these executive play tests, and got into public worlds and couldn't hear one another over the voices of kids. And these are kids who were using the product using adult accounts. That was the only way at the time, and still is the only way if you walk into a public space in Horizon and are hearing kids. It means they're using adult accounts. And the solution from the leadership team was to move the executive play test to private spaces.
Away from who they knew were children.
In order to be able to test the product in a way that ultimately wasn't representative of the actual product experience.
Okay, we need to break this down.
I know. Meta manipulates their own testing, and this is something we'll talk about later with more whistleblower accounts, but they manipulate their own testing of their platform to downplay the fact that there are children playing it and that there are children or on their platforms and children being exploited and harmed on their platforms. And this is a great example of that.
Yeah, so just for the listeners to sort of say it one more time, what Kelly talked about was the fact that when their own employees went into this virtual world to test the safety of it, there were so many kids already in it, like yelling at each other and things happening and other bad people that they couldn't, it was like an uncomfortable experience for the employees to be in it. Mm-hmm. And rather than lean into that and say, wow, we clearly have missed the mark here, they siloed some of the executives into a private setting so that their experience was nicer. And they didn't see that to help move the... And that decision-making is also happening at the highest levels, not necessarily even the teams. In fact, we know the trust and safety teams that worked on, especially Horizons and the virtual spaces, objected to them rolling out the product for kids because it was so dangerous.
Right. And to remind everyone, the age limit on Horizon Worlds, which is the VR game, and all of their social media platforms is 13. And so we're talking about their hearing that there's young children in there and not removing them. And next we're going to explain like why we're so concerned with Meta having all these young kids on there and not removing them, because it's super duper unsafe. And let's break that down next. So from the outside, Meta put out this image that they are connecting people all over the world, allowing people to explore their interests, and everything is great. But behind the scenes, it was a different story. Took a while for us to hear about this, but a few years ago, we started hearing from whistleblowers who worked for this company and wanted to share their stories and felt it was important for everybody to know what's really going on. So the first Meta whistleblower that I spoke with was David Erb. David is an incredible human. He was a Jeopardy champion. I just like really love David, but he worked for big tech companies for over 40 years, including Microsoft and Google and YouTube and Facebook. And he told me this horrifying story of back in 2019 when he identified that Facebook was actually enabling harm to children through its People You May Know feature. He found that the platform itself was recommending predators to young children, and even in their geographic area, and that a lot of the grooming and predation was taking place on Facebook Messenger. And he had some important suggestions to fix this safety issue, which he presented to the executive team. And I'm going to play a clip now of David recounting that experience.
And the senior person in the room said, David, you're in the community integrity seat at this table, but there are a lot of seats at this table. Now, the community integrity team at Facebook, at Meta today even, reports for some strange reason up to an organization called Growth, which is responsible for maximizing how many people use Facebook. What he made it clear to me was that what we wanted to do, which is take down the accounts of millions of predators, would be harmful to Facebook's numbers. So they didn't let us do anything. They didn't let us stop recommending children to adults. They didn't let us block messages. They didn't let us do anything. Believe it or not, it actually got worse. About 2 weeks after that meeting, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook at the time, Meta now, announced that he had decided that the company would, as soon as they could, they would encrypt end-to-end all these communications that we were basically able to monitor by being in the middle of it. They would encrypt them end-to-end so that we could no longer monitor anything. We could no longer tell if somebody was sending a dangerous message. We could no longer detect anything.
Can we just be very clear about what happened there? Like, you have someone telling the executives at this company that children are being groomed on their platform and they're enabling it to happen, and we can fix it. We can remove all these predators and stop this abuse. And they say no because we won't make money off of the abuse.
It's kind of so horrible to even like digest.
Yeah.
That decision to do that and to blind yourself to children who are in a precarious situation. I'm obviously very close to that decision because at the time I was working at an organization that was actively in conversation with Meta about their decision to encrypt Messenger and what was going to get lost and how vulnerable it was going to make children when they did that. And the problem was we never really got an honest answer about why, because we knew that it's because they just didn't, it absolves them of so much responsibility. But instead, the part that was so frustrating is they would argue the opposite, that they were going to come up with all these new ways to do it better. And that's just not been true. Right. And you can look at the numbers from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to prove that. Mm-hmm. And it means that kids are now more vulnerable, more exposed, and they're being exploited, and there's no one there to watch. And the other point I want to make about this is that this is where adults being online and kids being online are totally different, because two adults talking to each other one-to-one, I get it.
Right. Encrypt it.
Yes, there's still downsides, because I could share CSAM with you, child sexual abuse material. Uh-huh. So we have to solve for that. But an adult talking to a child, in what other world would you put an adult, a stranger adult, and a child in a room, close all the windows, close the door, and be like, yeah, talk to each other for 8 hours. No one's gonna, listen in. No one's gonna peek through the window, make sure it's all okay. So this just hits home that online spaces for kids need to be different than they are for adults.
And for me, this makes it very clear that that was a reaction to add end-to-end encryption, was a reaction to cover their asses on the harm that was happening through their platforms.
Well, but to be fair, also Cambridge Analytica scandal had just happened, and so people were saying Meta is listening to all my things, taking all my data and reselling it. So they were like, oh, okay, cool, we won't listen. Okay. But they weren't doing it responsibly.
They should have treated accounts differently.
100%. Well, and so then this leads us to the whistleblower, who many people know, because the moment where she came forward was a game-changing moment, not just against Meta, but it sort of blew open the door on the big tech companies when it comes to child safety, right? Yeah. And that's when Frances Haugen testified in front of Congress in 2021 and shared with the public and with Congress a bunch of the documents that she'd been privy to at Meta that showed this negligent decision making at a whole nother scale.
She was so brave to do that. I mean,
yeah,
really paved the way for a lot of other people to come forward in the following years.
I think the focus of her whistleblowing moment was to show the mental harm, negative mental health effects that Instagram in particular were having on teens, and Meta's tolerance of that, right? And this was also, now we know, around the time that a lot of other Facebook employees were starting to see those same things, which was this tolerance for the good. You have to take the bad with the good, right? So yes, overall the experience is really fun and nice, and you get great recommendations on shopping and get to see cool places that your friends went, but sure, there's going to be some bad stuff in there too. Yeah. The problem is the bad stuff is really bad, it's addictive, and it causes major mental health problems for especially young people.
And it's happening on an industrial scale, which we will get into shortly. So then fast forward to November of 2023, and we have Arturo Bejar, who we love.
Yes.
And you've spent a lot of time with Arturo. Do you want to give a little background on his role and how he came into this?
Yeah, so Arturo is awesome. The thing that's really important about the work that Arturo has done is, and also the moment that he left Meta that was different than like Francis and the people that had come before, is up until a certain point, he felt like he could still get Facebook's leadership to engage. Mm-hmm. And when he would raise a red flag of like, there's a problem here, they would respond. And the infamous story of his now is that he had left Meta, he'd come back, he'd recognized that in particular girls were getting approached constantly by creepers and other predators on Instagram, and that kids were basically having to like fend them off all the time.
Yep.
And also this begins the part of the conversation around the promotion of sexualized content. So if there was a 14-year-old who made a video in all their clothes talking about something, it performed a certain way. If there was a 14-year-old in like a tank top with some chest showing, that video performed better.
Really?
Yes. And so he started raising the alarm on this. He wrote a really eloquent email to Mark and Cheryl and I think Chris Cox and a few other people. This is all public record. And it had all the data and said, I want to meet with you about this and fix it. And they never responded to that email. And for him, that was a turning point, because at least before that, Meta's leadership had like engaged.
Right.
But this was a different level of just not even responding.
Mm-hmm.
Huge red flag.
Yeah.
And that began his journey of whistleblowing, but also research. Arturo and a number of organizations, including the HEAT Initiative, alongside many other organizations, have spent the last year researching and demonstrating that Meta's safety solutions don't work, but doing it in an incredibly systematic academic way.
Yeah.
And so what I like about his work is that his goal is for them to actually get better, and he keeps giving them the data to do so, and they keep looking the other way.
Yeah, and we're going to get into more of his research later on Instagram teen accounts, so we should all be wondering if those actually work. But I want to play a quick clip from our conversation with Arturo.
So I oversaw research, just one of the things that I did, where we asked teenagers, what's some bad stuff that's happened to you on Instagram in the last 7 days? And the numbers that came back from that were staggering and like crushing, right? 1 in 8 kids said they had gotten an unwanted sexual advance on Instagram in the last 7 days. 1 in 10 had been the target of bullying and harassment, and 1 in 3 had watched it happening, which was an incredible normalizing effect. And so the numbers were staggering for all of these categories. And by the end of that report, and I had it, I realized that I had what generally you would call a material or critical finding for the company. And I've been doing this for like 30 years. When I first started working on security, and then at Yahoo, I was head of security for Yahoo, working with CEOs forever. You find a certain kind of thing, you package it up and you bring it to them with recommendations. You make sure the findings are correct and accurate, which is something I was responsible for. The accuracy of how things get represented was one of my jobs from an engineering and product perspective. So I brought that to Mark Zuckerberg, Adam Mosseri, the leadership on Instagram, being like, there's if you do the math right, hundreds of millions, right? Millions and millions of kids, all of this harm. And in my experience, I send an email like that, and the next day I get a meeting, and the next day there's already things to make it better. That's not what happened, clearly.
Arturo, in his Congress testimony, called this the largest scale sexual harassment of teens to have ever happened. And I think that's really powerful to think about.
Yeah, I think this is the part that Meta is so effectively hidden from the public still.
Yeah. Okay, so fast forward a little bit to March 2025, and we have a whistleblower come out named Sarah Wynne Williams, and she wrote a book called Careless People. She revealed a lot of things in there, some harassment she feels based on her gender, some really tough experiences. The book is a really interesting read. I read it in, I think, 8 hours, just breezed right through it. But one thing that really stood out to me when it comes to kids and what she had reported is that Meta was, through Instagram, targeting teenagers who would delete a selfie from their camera roll, not on Instagram, from their camera roll, and Meta would feed that information to advertisers who would then send them an ad for a beauty product. So teenagers who are feeling bad about how they look and vulnerable in that moment, that would be a good time to serve them an ad for a beauty product. And that's just an example of the abhorrent behavior of this company.
So going back to Kelly Stone Lake, who you were talking about too, and this brings up a really interesting question about whistleblowers in general. I think it's important to always be asking them how they came to their decision to speak publicly. It's really complicated for all of them, and it's not easy. I think there's some preconceived notions that people have too about whistleblowers, that it's sort of like going against certain loyalties. And when you look at all the different factors that people like Kelly had to weigh in deciding to do this, like, it's no small feat, it's no small decision. So Kelly has filed a civil lawsuit alleging sexual discrimination against Meta, retaliation, and sexual harassment. And she's also worked with several federal offices and given sworn statements to the FTC and to the Senate Judiciary Committee. So I believe we have a clip from her now talking about her case against Meta.
I blew the whistle on Meta because by the time I was able to fully kind of comprehend the system that was operating, both in terms of the way employees were being treated and then by proxy, the harms that Meta's customers were being exposed to, especially kids, there was really no way through that but to accept the fact that I was part of that. A, this was a really dangerous situation, and B, that I had been a part of it, and that even though I didn't understand as I was experiencing it what the company was capable of, learning, when I experienced as a director in Horizon that the rest of the leadership team was ultimately comfortable with driving the product forward and growing and expanding the product, even though we knew that there were kids in harm's way in the product. And then the way that I saw the rest of the company and senior leadership respond to those concerns, there was just no way through that but to take action to try to make it right.
So she identified that executives within the company were comfortable with harm to children in order to drive product growth.
I made a joke to you a few minutes ago about like this section of this podcast, Meta Whistleblowers. We have by far the most whistleblowers on this company.
Yeah.
And that's for a reason. Dr. Jason Sadazan and Casey Savage.
These are researchers who study the safety of Meta's platforms, and that they were being instructed specifically by Meta's attorneys to remove questions related to safety, to downplay the results of the research showing harm to children. And that was further cemented just this last month, so just in October of 2025, when we had documents come out within another lawsuit where Meta's attorneys are specifically, you see, this isn't just being reported by someone, you see the email where they're demanding that researchers remove data showing that the product is harmful to children. So this is a video by one of the researchers, Casey Savage, who is in Congress talking about her experiences.
What proportion of Meta's VR users, the children, the minors, are exposed to sexually explicit content, sexual propositioning, sexual abuse of some kind on a VR platform?
I would estimate that any child that is in a social space in VR will come in contact with or directly expose something very inappropriate.
I'm sorry, did you say any child?
Yes.
So you mean every user?
Yes.
Every user will be exposed, every minor, every child will be exposed to sexually explicit content of some sort, is what you're saying?
I see it every time I use the headset.
That's remarkable. That's just remarkable.
So she's reporting that it's not only a high percentage of kids that will see sexual or inappropriate content, but it's every single user that, and she's particularly talking about the VR game Horizon Worlds.
Why is it on the market if the estimation is that every child user who goes into it is going to have a negative like sexual encounter or a predator?
I think that brings us, that's a larger problem of these tech companies rushing products to market in order to compete with each other And we talked about that with our chatbot episode, all of those AI companies rushing to market without the safety standards in place. And that's the same thing I think that was happening here. They were desperate to get it to market and were willing to not put in place the resources to make it safe.
I think it was last holiday season, they really pushed the headset as a gift for kids. And it's interesting because I feel that most parents rejected that. I remember seeing the posters of little kids with the thing over their eyes.
Yeah.
I feel that most parents saw that, and that was one step too far.
Yeah.
Putting something on your kid's face.
Yeah.
And taking them out of the real world.
Yeah.
It almost helped parents start to see
how dystopian that is.
Yes.
I interviewed some VR experts, and they talked about how immersive it is, right? You really feel like you are wherever you are in the game. And that means that any traumatic experiences that happen within that experience feel very real to you. So the harms are way worse within like an immersive VR experience long term
than just on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What Meta is relying on is that we see these handful of whistleblowers and think that those are just a few individuals who have an axe to grind against Meta, or who, were disgruntled by their pay package. And we're here to tell you that's not true, but we're also here to tell you that with data and research that multiple entities have done to confirm what the whistleblowers have been saying. So all of this work is going into now showing that Meta lies about its platform and how safe it is for kids. And we have some great examples of research and reports that prove just that.
There are dozens here, so we're just going to cover a couple. We have a Wall Street Journal report that they did multiple tests that show that Instagram recommends sexual videos to accounts for 13-year-olds. We have another report from Fair Play, which they call Designing for Disorder, that tracked 153 popular Instagram accounts that celebrate thinspiration or bonespiration. They found that almost 34% of users that followed these pro-eating disorder accounts were underage, with some users as young as 9.
And this is the backbone of a few of the lawsuits they're going to trial next year, is that Meta essentially created eating disorders in very young girls by proactively recommending this kind of harmful eating disorder content to people. So this is a really important distinction that parents need to understand. When a kid goes on Instagram, it's not just about what their interests are. So for instance, if you have a kid that you trust and you're like, well, my kid likes baseball, and they're just going to look at stuff around their interests, and their interests are harmless. The problem is that Meta is proactively recommending videos to your child, and they are purposefully recommending bad videos because that keeps your child's attention longer. So it's not that they're just sending them all the good stuff. They're purposely sending them the bad stuff because that tricks their little brain and honestly sucks their little brain in to scrolling more and more and more and consuming more and more and more. And this directly correlates with things like eating disorder obsessions or falling into a depression. That young mind can't fight back and say, I don't want more of this, it's harming me.
And so you have Meta saying that they're proactively tracking and removing all of this harmful content, when in reality, they're hiring neuroscientists to help them build an algorithm that actually pushes bad stuff to our kids because they understand how the brain works better than any of us do.
Right. And I think the test accounts that people have done where they go on and researchers go on and pretend to be 13-year-olds, what those reports and research has proven is that the platforms are proactively sending the bad stuff, not the good stuff. So within a matter of minutes, researchers were getting like Nazi videos and eating disorder content and racist content or over-sexualized images and videos. The other danger that people don't talk about a lot that's really important is if you have a young child in these environments too, and they're purposely sending you overly sexual images and videos of younger kids, it can actually drive your own child to consuming child sexual abuse content or content like that because they're driving that interest.
And I'm going to say this out loud, like there's surveys of pedophiles who say, I didn't seek this out. It was pushed to me again and again and again until I started to think that that was normal.
Right. And I'm not trying to take away their responsibility in it, but I'm just saying that we have allowed for there to be environments that have normalized this. And we should link to Michael Keller at the New York Times wrote a piece about this last year about accounts that have purposely sexualized children that have all these followers pop up out of nowhere. Right. And you have to ask yourself, like, why is that there? Yeah. And why are we promoting it to kids?
Through this testing done by organizations across the globe, one of the emerging threats was sextortion. And this is something that every parent should be understanding how it works so that we can talk to our young people about it, because experts say that nearly every young person, particularly teenage boys, but this could happen to anyone, will be targeted with this scam, this threat.
I think the first time I came into contact with how sad the reality of this is for teens who are in Instagram environments was a survey done by the organization I used to work at, Thorn, and it talked about how most kids have just gotten used to creepers and fending them off, that is a normal reality that kids face, which is so sad. Because if you think about a kid walking through a mall and a bunch of like gross old guys coming up to them, making comments about their bodies, asking them for things, we'd be horrified. Yeah. We'd shut it down in 2 seconds. But this happens daily online in places like Instagram, and we tolerate it because we think it's normal now.
And the problem is that it's very hard to identify what is happening before it's too late. And so these teens get contacted by what they think is a young girl, typically contacting them as a boy and flirting until there's nude images sent, and then they demand money or the image will be shared with their family and friends. And we need to take this threat so seriously because it's leading to a lot of teen suicides. We have nearly 60 teenagers that it's known that they took their life because they were in this sextortion situation and they didn't see a way out of it. And this has been growing exponentially, like an 18,000% increase in sextortion, targeting over just a couple of years. So where does Meta come into all this? We brought in a sextortion expert, cyber analyst, Paul Raphael, who's like the leading expert in this space. Go to his LinkedIn profile and review Paul's latest posts. He's putting pressure on the companies and actually having direct conversations with these companies about the sextortion problem on their platform. So let's hear from Paul on this now.
We know that Instagram is the primary platform where teens are being targeted in these sextortion schemes. Sextortion is, of course, a crime that oftentimes involves multiple platforms. And, Instagram is kind of that perfect initial vector where teens are being targeted. Instagram is essentially the world's largest directory of teens for criminals and predators.
Paul, from your perspective, how long do you feel like Meta has known this about the platform, that sextortion is a huge issue?
Meta has actually known about financial sextortion happening on their platforms since the 2010s. Smaller networks of criminals were starting to crop up. But the interesting thing is that Meta was actually capturing this data. So they were actually able to see in real time the number of sextortion incidents that were occurring on their platform. And as it rapidly started to grow in 2021, 2022. Last time I was here with you all, there were 26,000 reported cases of financial sextortion targeting minors in 2023. That number has grown to 36,000. So a very substantial increase based on the 2024 numbers.
So Meta knew about this maybe even 10 plus years ago because they were receiving reports within their platform. Do you feel like they've made meaningful changes over the past decade to protect children from sextortion threats?
Absolutely not. I mean, they like to come out every couple of months or every couple of years with these new safety features and, public service announcements. Basically, it's all PR press releases.
So that's the leading expert that studies sextortion saying that Meta has done nothing meaningful to protect children from sextortion when their platform is the number one vector or point where kids are getting targeted.
Yeah, it reminds me of our episode on Snap when we talked about if they knew the drug dealers were there, why didn't they warn parents? This feels like very similar. If you know that kids are getting sextorted at this level, why are there not PSAs everywhere? You know, make sure to educate your teen or talk to your teen about naked girls reaching out to them, and that it's not their fault if they get tripped up in something like this, that they can seek help from you, but also that the fact that the platform facilitates it, it continues to grow, and also that the solutions that they're proposing are not nearly enough. So there are some clear product changes they could make around sextortion that would greatly reduce the risk that Meta just will not do. We are trying to drag them there, kicking and screaming, but research as recently as last month shows that there are still workarounds. So there was a year where they said, well, Instagram Teens provides this environment where there's is far less likely to happen. Our partners over at Parents Together have just recently put out a incredible piece of research, and I say incredible because it's just so unfathomable that Meta still wouldn't fix this issue. Wow. But where stranger adults can still befriend kids by commenting on their content and then just encouraging them to accept them as a friend, right? And then all of a sudden you're back into DMs, which is where the whole issue happens on Instagram DMs of them talking to a kid and getting them to share a nude. And actually this report goes into detail too about knowing one account is registered to a child, the adult account sending them naked images and photos, and then like CSAM, and basically knowing that those accounts are sharing CSAM back and forth. Like Meta claims that it's made moves to help reduce sextortion, and the reality is it hasn't. And a kid can still get sextorted, and they need to do a lot more to fix it. Here is my request to Mark Zuckerberg. If you feel like Instagram is safe for kids, I would ask that you allow your eldest daughter to make a profile and get on Instagram. And I know you would say, well, we would catch that because she's 10, but the reality is that's not true. We've seen plenty of 10-year-olds on Instagram, and just let her use it unmonitored for a few weeks and then come back and tell us what happened. That is my request, because you are asking us to gamble with our own children's lives. And we're not saying, obviously, we don't wish harm on any child, and we're not saying there will be extreme harms per se, but I just want you to see what kind of environment they experience and what happens to them.
And feel what that feels like as her parent, to have your child exposed to things like this, to predators sending naked images, to being bullied by peers.
And if it's a PG-13 environment. Right. And then you come back to us and you let us know how it goes.
Report back. We'll be here. The latest threat that Meta kind of rushed to market along with all these other tech companies was their AI chatbots. And these are humanized like characters trying to interact and be friends with our children within Instagram. And there was not really a big announcement about this that reached parents' ears. Kids just started being able to interact with these AI chatbots. And this was especially concerning to me. I had a parent send me a screenshot of her 13-year-old's feed. And within the algorithm, within the For You feed, were suggested chatbots that were teenage-looking girls named things like Nasty Nancy, or just the username of one of them was XXX. And so this is Meta promoting sexualized chatbots to young children. And then I wasn't surprised when I heard through some internal documents that were released that Meta had purposefully programmed their chatbots to engage sensually, to be allowed to engage sensually with minors.
Think about that for a second. I mean, the documents that Jeff Horowitz reported on for Reuters on this are as bad as it sounds.
We talked with author and professor Jonathan Haidt about this specifically, and I want to play a clip where he kind of breaks down this report about Meta's bots being sensual with children.
We know from that report by Jeff Horowitz has been incredible on this. He's a reporter. He's at the Wall Street Journal. A document that came out It was an internal ethics memo. It was like, and it was it was a policy. It's like, here's our policy on what chatbots can and cannot do. And one of the biggest questions is, to what extent can they talk about sex? To what extent? Because they know that lots of people are going to be creating sex chatbots and then masturbating to them. So how far can the chatbot go in terms of being erotic with children? And the answer, you would think, is they can't. But that's not what the official policy at Meta is. The official policy at Meta is that they can have sensual, that was their word, they can have sensual conversations, and they give examples. And it was things like, every inch of your body is a masterpiece. I mean, it's like, it's like softcore porn. They can have softcore porn conversations with 11-year-olds. That is explicitly allowed. And the document was signed off on not just by like some obscure safety officer it was signed off on by the chief legal officers. It was signed off on by the chief ethics officer. This was company policy. So this is not a company that we want our children to have anything to do with. We should think of Meta like a tobacco company, like a porn company, a gambling company. It's an adult company. Children should not be using Meta products.
So one update on the chatbots. After years of these bots being available to children and a lot of pressure from people like us and parents everywhere, Meta finally allowed parents to disable the chatbots within their teen accounts. Are we happy about this?
Thank God.
Of course we're happy about this, but this should have been how it was structured in the beginning.
Right. Or some alert should have come onto the parent's phone, literally like a push notification. Your kid's Instagram account now has live bots in it that it can talk to.
Even better, don't let the minors interact with bots at all.
Yeah. So they did remove them because they know how dangerous they are, and they didn't get away with it. They didn't get away with sort of shoving them in there and hoping people didn't notice. Here is the lie that Mark Zuckerberg has sold all of us. He has convinced us that in order for us to enjoy Instagram the way we all enjoy it, and I'll be honest, I do like it. I get to see fun videos of things I want to see, my friends on vacation, my family members in other states. Also, I hate to say it, but I do like a lot of the ads that I get for cool products that aren't mainstream, or a new shoe company that I enjoy. But the lie that he sold us is that for me to have that experience, there's going to be some bad stuff on there too that kids have to interact with, because they don't control everything that gets on the platform, and there are bad people out there and they're going to take advantage of it. But what he's hiding behind in that lie is that the amount of badness is equal to the amount of goodness. And so when we keep putting forward these numbers around how many kids are harmed, or statistics, they'll be like, that's just the outlier. Those are just a few kids. It's not just a few kids. If you look at the research, and especially the ones that have asked teens themselves what they're experiencing, almost half having a negative experience, almost half being a victim of sextortion or an attempt to sextort. And so what half means in an Instagram environment is hundreds of millions of kids worldwide. So what you're saying, Mark, is you're comfortable with hundreds of millions of children having really bad experiences and hundreds of millions of kids having really good experiences, but you're literally saying that half having bad is okay with you.
If any other company doing any other type of service or providing any other type of product harming half of its users, they would not be in business.
No.
This is something that was made very clear in our conversation with Jonathan Haidt, and he talked about the scale of harm. So I want to play that clip now.
Oh, yes. I mean, Meta is the originator of the business model, the engagement-based business model. Meta, as far as I know, is the company with by far the most whistleblowers coming out, employees saying bad things. So in terms of sheer quantity of harm, I think Meta dominates.
Yeah, and I think One of the most frustrating things about this, and again, something I've learned from Arturo Bejar, the whistleblower, is it doesn't have to be this way. So going back to millions are having a bad experience and millions are having good experiences, the answer to that could actually be that like everybody's actually having a good experience, but what that would require is for them to fundamentally change the product and the business model, and it would be far less profitable, and that's why they don't do it. But it's not because it's not possible.
Right. And that's what we want to explore more in part 2 of The Heat is on Meta. We're probably a little overwhelmed with all of the harms, but it is important for us to understand how all of this is going down and what our kids are actually experiencing when they spend time on Meta's platforms. So the next episode is going to be all about solutions, digging into what Meta has provided us as solutions. Are those actually working? And what we need to pressure them to do to fix it.
And we're going to talk about in the second episode, too, the acknowledgement of you might be even seeing this clip or listening to part of this podcast on Instagram, and like, how do we detangle our lives from something that is such a big part of it, especially when we're mad at it and don't want to be here anymore.
Right. And in the end, it may be that we're all moving to something safer, but we will do that all together. We'll do that as a unit. Holding hands in defiance. But for now, we're focused on the harm to children and protecting our kids, because what is more important than that? So as always, you can get involved right now by going to scrollingtodeath.com/heat, providing your email address. We are sending regular emails with ways that you can pressure companies like Meta to do better when it comes to child safety. On the next episode of The Heat is On.
Every major promise Meta makes at the heart of Instagram teens, we found that every single one of those core promises is a broken promise.
Not only is Meta proactively marketing Instagram teens as a safe environment, they are actively trying to message to parents who said no before, now is the time you should say yes.
While I don't think there's a conscious effort to kill people and hurt people and steal childhood, there is a complete disregard for the fact that that's happening.